Good evening and welcome again to Ideas at Work and Beyond. This week we are definitely in the studio. We're not out in some Caribbean country like Belize interviewing prisoners that are stuck down there in Caribbean prisons and looking at underprivileged poor areas in that country. But we are talking, and tonight's show is going to be focused on one race. If you can imagine, I think there was something in the neighborhood of 4,600 votes that were cast in Ridgefield, and one race between Irene Burgess and Keith Miller ended in a precise tie, a dead-on tie. And so now on November 24th, that's next Tuesday, November 24th, there will be a runoff election. All the polling places will be open at Yanity Gym, up at Scotts Ridge Middle School, as well as East Ridge Middle School. I think the polls open like 6 in the morning and they go on till 8 at night. There will be a re-election, a re-voting of this race between Keith Miller and Irene Burgess. Now, in this cable access show, we are keen on providing services to the public. And we would very much like to give the whole show to this race that's going to be run next Tuesday, November 24th, as I mentioned before, between Keith Miller and Irene Burgess. Unfortunately, we were unable to arrange for either the other candidate to appear on the show or substitutes. We went through quite a litany of other folks. The reasons given for not going was that this show is, and I should say me in particular, are partisan, and therefore they wouldn't be given a fair shake in the program. I would beg to differ. We've had people on this show. We've had a state senate debate right here in this studio between who's the Democrat in that race?
You don't remember the guy's name?
Tony Boucher and.
Oh, you know her name though, right?
I know Tony. I always remember the winners.
John Hartwell.
The winners write history.
Yeah, okay.
And John Hartwell. We had him right here, and I believe both of them had a chance to speak, and it worked out fine. We've had Republicans. We've had Democrats. By the way, how's Jason Bartlett? Is everything okay with him these days?
I think his license is up to date now.
License is up to date now? And I'm glad to hear that.
Oh,
so we've had Democrats, we've had Republicans, and I feel this is a good forum. However, tonight, the entire hour, for better or worse, is going to be given to you. If you call in, the phone number is 792-4101, 792-4101. And I'm requesting that you call in and ask Keith Miller, our lone candidate that found it in his busy schedule to appear here, to answer questions from people that are viewing this show tonight. I've got some questions that I have just based on what was in the Ridgefield Press. By the way, we also had Mac Reed, the editor of the Press, to come in to moderate the debate. We went through all kinds of hoops to try and make this come together. And then we also have some other questions. But please, do not hesitate to call in 792-4101 and really hold Keith's feet to the fire. He's here. He's ready to face the electorate, and he wants to hear from you. So without any further ado, Mr. Miller, thank you very much for coming in. We have Al Robinson on the set as well. Al Robinson is in some way standing in for others that might not want to be here to hold your feet to the fire. But my question is, after all this work that you've done, after all the campaigning, what was your first thought when you saw that it ended in a tie?
Well, you know, as a little history, it started out as I'd lost by 2 votes. And I went home and told my wife that I'd lost by 2 votes, and she was good with that.
She was fine with it. She wants this whole nonsense to be over.
She had a long list of things for me to do, and she was fine with that. And they did a recount, which is the state statute. When it's that close, they have to do a recount. And then I was down by 1, and then it was tied around lunchtime with 2 districts left to be counted, and it stayed tied through the rest. And when I told her it was still tied, she thought that wasn't the perfect solution. I was stunned, is the answer. I mean, 3 races in Connecticut ended up in a tie. There were probably 6,000 races in Connecticut, so it was...
What was the vote count again?
2,352 to 2,352.
Wow.
And as I explained to people, it's like winning the lottery, only it doesn't pay as well.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you then went into basically what would be the equivalent of the football 2-minute drill in terms of get out there, repaint your signs, because nobody can print them that quick.
Right, I saw that.
And, you know, talk to folks about trying to get a debate set up, and you were kind enough to offer right off the bat, and so we'd set up Thursday about a week ago from today, or Wednesday a week ago from today, and some other groups tried to pull together some stuff, but they just...
Yeah, I said the League of Women Voters tried to put together a debate.
League of Women, the PTA, but, you know, they learned Wednesday that this had transpired, and they were like, can we find a moderator? Can we find a place to do this? Thursday, Friday came by, and just, you know, I gave them some dates and all, and just nothing could be, the other side just couldn't work with those dates. So,
well, we actually had another member of the Board of Ed who was going to come in, and she couldn't find a babysitter, so I offered my daughter to babysit for her, and that worked out, but I think she didn't like the format, that this was some sort of a debate or something like that. So, well, for better or worse, we have you here. I'm going to ask you some questions. I know Al has some questions, but I want to sort of frame the issue for those people that might be tuning in tonight that aren't kind of up to speed. You have been painted as the guy that wants to close schools, and the other person has been painted as the person that wants to keep schools open. You're painted as the fiscal conservative. The other candidate is painted more as willing to spend whatever it takes to do a lot of good things. Is that a fair characterization, or how would you flesh that out?
I think the answer is far more nuanced. I mean, people like to boil it down to a bumper sticker or a short slogan that they can deliver people, but I think the answers are really in the details. And you know, I've been in business for 3 decades, and improvements and victory comes in inches. It doesn't come in a simple slogan. You really have to do the hard work of seeing how you do the best with things. As I've campaigned and I've talked to people, one of the things that I've heard repeatedly is that many in Ridgefield are very stressed by the economic environment. You know, unemployment's gone to 10%, and you know, those who still have their jobs, you know, who are working on commission, have seen commissions cut. Those who are on fixed income have seen the income coming off of retirement plans and 401ks cut, and they're very, very stressed. This comes on top of Ridgefield still trying to digest a huge bundle for new schools that was expensive. It was $120 million, and every year we pay back $14 or $15 or $16 million worth of debt service.
Yeah.
And that's a big nut for the town to be working on. So as I've talked to people, they sit there and say, my income's down. I cannot pay more. I'd like to see, you know, my expenses go down, including their tax expenses. So in that environment, what, you know, good businesses do, good operations, etc., they look inside for efficiencies.
Right.
They don't sit there and say, look, we can get by raising prices or asking more. They look for efficiencies. And the school spent 6 months in a restructuring study from May to October, and they looked at many different ways to try to restructure the elementary schools into a more efficient configuration. They looked at K2, 3, 5. They looked at utilizing middle school space more. They looked at all kinds of things. And in the end, what boiled down was continue with the 6 elementary schools, or go back to 5. Which they'd had in 2003. And the reality is, in 2003, enrollment peaked in the elementary schools at around almost 2,600 and started to go down. And the next year, they opened the 6 elementary schools. So we used to fit 2,600 kids in 5 elementary schools. We now have an extra building and 300 fewer students. And 2,600 is on its way down by roughly 1,000. So we have extra space, and the question is, can you use the money you're spending on that space more efficiently? And that was the study. That was the study they did. And my recommendations throughout October, into the election, etc., was the administration needed to do the detailed work to define the feasibility and how you do it, and whether you can do it. And getting down to the details of Billy was here Billy's now going to be there. This was his bus. This is his new bus. To make sure, to ensure that anything you might want to do actually works.
Right. I had one question along those lines. There was a feasibility study. There was a group,
There was
panel that was put together that studied this thing for how many months?
6 months. There was
6 months.
3 dozen people, and they really went through broad options.
Okay.
They never really did detailed
So
work.
3 dozen people worked for over 6 months. Is that?
Yeah. So
And-
we're
and-
talking
I mean,
about
'cause
man-years of effort.
I ended up going to the event. I remember it was at East Ridge Middle School, and they were going to, issue their report.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, it seems like a good panel, and it's a cross-section of people involved in the schools, people involved in who had been through this before, and they had this document that was, a thick document. It went through the history, because this happens before. I mean, populations do ebb and flow. But at the end of it, there were no recommendations. It seemed like there was no sort of closure to this issue.
So I've been, I think, very vocal saying you need to move towards closure. You need to define what is feasible. I don't know if people can see this one
I'll
chart.
hold that up.
Can you hold that
you
chart?
just talk, yeah. We'll get it, but you can talk about it.
When he zooms in, I want to talk to the chart. But what this
Yeah.
chart shows is the history of Ridgefield schools from 1965 to today,
Right.
and forecast out into 2015.
Okay.
And I use my fancy laser pointer here. What you see here is this is the enrollment as it's behaved. I couldn't find the hard numbers back here, but back in the early 60s and 70s, enrollment peaked at roughly 6,000 students in the whole school system, with over 3,000 in a K through 6 elementary school. The elementary schools were somewhat bigger. And then it declined precipitously. The blue bars here show the capacity of the system in terms of schools. So if you have 6 schools and a school has a capacity of 400 to 500 students each, you have a capacity of roughly 2,400 to 3,000 students. And as you can see, we fit over 3,000 students back here in this time. As it came down, they closed they opened their 6th building in, I believe it was 68 or 69, and they closed it within a decade. And then they went quickly through, closed the 5th building, and operated with 4 buildings for a decade. And then it came back up. And when we did the bundle in 2000, 2001, the projection was that enrollment was going to go up, going to continue to rise, going to follow this curve and continue to rise. And reality was it didn't. I mean, to date, we've come down, and we're down 300, 400 students from that projection. And if you look at the projection going forward, it's supposed to go down to 1,500. So we're in the band now where 5 elementary schools, work. And the question is, can you use the cost of those 5 elementary schools more efficiently than running 6?
Okay. Caller, you on the air?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. What's your question for Mr. Miller? Yes, caller, you're on the air. Did you have?
Yeah. Hey, Marty, Chris McQuilkin here. How's it going?
Good, good. Thanks for calling in.
Here, let me just turn down my sound here, Marty. Hang on a second.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. It's interesting the graph Keith has right there. Hey, Keith, how's it going? The flaw with that, and I think this is the problem that everybody sees with the issue, is that we don't know the future of this. It could be that Keith's graph is correct and the numbers start to go down, but they haven't gone down yet. And that was my big concern on it, that maybe we in fact go up. I mean, think of one thing that's going on right here, in that nobody can sell their house, right? You got all these empty nesters starting to build up in Ridgefield because the house prices are so low. And so if they're there in Ridgefield not selling their houses, what happens, say, 2 years from now when the economy recovers and all the empty nesters suddenly say, okay, my house prices return to normal, I'm going to sell it, and when I do sell it, now suddenly all these new families move in. You might get suddenly this surge of people. I mean, that's just fundamentals say that happens, whereas we have somebody like a Dr. Chung making these predictions based on, like, past history, but not really looking at this idea that maybe there'll be a surge in a few years.
All right, Chris, let me just ask something. On Dr. Chung's predictions, he's been doing this. This isn't that recent. He's been doing it for quite a few years. And I think this was the bar graph in that presentation by the Reconfiguration Committee. How have his projections been as far as accuracy, say, going back the last 3 or 4 years?
Well, yeah, it's an interesting question. And I don't mean to cut Keith off there. I can't actually see you guys, so certainly cut me off if I'm talking too much here.
No. As a matter of fact, full disclosure, you were one of the guys that I was begging to come on the show because we wanted to have someone that could, hold Keith's feet to the fire, and figured you would be the best guy.
In fact, as I was saying, I would be glad to do it, and Keith, I would be glad to talk to you about these things, but it just is a little odd for anybody who's listening there. I happen to be a Republican, so it just didn't seem like the right thing for me.
I know, but you're supportive of the person that's opposing Keith in this election, right? And in lieu of her appearing on the show, it would seem like you would be an appropriate person to take the opposing side on some of these issues.
Yeah, but the real issue is Keith is actually a very good-looking guy, and I can't hold up to the two of you. So I thought, well, okay.
I gotta agree with you,
Chris,
there.
what's your question?
But you had asked the question about the prediction of Dr. Chung, but it's really interesting if you look back at that data. Back in 2000, just before the bundle happened, he predicted there's going to be a skyrocket upward of people. The bundle was passed, and then just after the bundle was passed, the enrollment's going down. And now we have all this extra school space. So in terms of his accuracy, I'm not impressed by it.
Yeah, no, Chris, I'm going to, there's the chart, if you can see it. It agrees with your statement. This was the projection in 2001 that he gave us, which was continual increase. One comment with respect to your commentary is enrollment already has dropped. It's not a question of will we see it go down. It did go down. It has gone down. It's off almost 300 from the peak.
All right.
And
I hear you.
if you look at the enrollment in some of these elementary schools, it's roughly 300 students, 350 students. So it already has gone down. The question going forward, having looked at his methodology and all the rest, is it's primarily a cohort system that says if you went to first grade this year, you're going to go to second grade next year. And the way you get new people into the system is A, they're born here, or B, as you said, they move in here. And if you look at the history of his work, in this late 90s, early 2000, there was a huge home building spree and home selling ended up roughly 600 units a year. Mm-hmm. A lot of that was fed by the housing bubble. A lot of that was fed by Fannie and Freddie. So when you say, is there pent-up demand, is this going to bounce back, you have to ask yourself whether you think housing is ever going to go back to the bubble that it had gone through. Now, his projections say yes. His projections say it's going to come back when the economy recovers in 2-3 years and there's growth. He's projecting that house sales go back to 450, 500, and that's driving his curve here. But the people who are here now and the people who move in as housing comes back to 450, 500 is built into that projection. So I don't think it's unreasonable as you look at it. Now, is it going to go that low? I don't really know. But the end point of this chart, when you look at it, down here at under 1,500 students, is the bottom end of the capacity for 4 buildings. So the question of should you have 5, I mean, this does not seem like an outlandish question.
Go ahead, Al.
Let's just make it
Can I
simple.
throw something in there? Or?
Hold on one second,
go ahead.
Chris. We'll come back to you. Go ahead.
Let's
Al.
just make it real simple, because I've been reading a lot of this stuff on the forums, been reading about this in the press. There's a perception out there that you are just 100% for closing the school. So let's just put it on the line right now. Are you for closing the school, yes or no?
I think the answer is that at some point in the future, sooner than later, you would be able to take the money you're spending on maintaining a school, put it into programs, and provide a better education.
So
that's the bottom line.
So you are on your platform of running for closing the school?
Yeah. My
Okay.
opponent has originally said, don't close anything. Never. And as the press explained, and as she came out and said recently, you know what, if the enrollment goes down like that, we need to seriously look at closing a school. You can't carry 6 buildings half full. It's just too expensive. There's too much money tied up.
How many empty classrooms are there right now in East Ridge Middle School?
I haven't stared at East Ridge. The real focus has been on the middle school, but there's probably, I know there's some empties there, and I've heard it's somewhere between half a dozen and a dozen.
Okay.
But
Chris, you had a follow-up question?
Yeah, I did, a few of them. I wish I was there talking to you guys in person.
Chris, it's not a hard place to find. 5 Shelter Rock Road. You're always welcome.
Yeah. A few thoughts in there. I think it's inevitable that we will close a school. Somebody might be portraying it as, oh, there'll never be a school closed. I think there will be. I think the same people who are trying to get Irene elected also see that their school is going to be closed. So I don't think it's 100%, hey, I'm never going to close a school in there. Enrollment will go down. The problem, though, is that it's not down yet. And
Chris,
couple that with the idea that our test scores are so lousy in our particular district compared to the overall region. And when you look at that, you think, well, how can you close the school now? If there was a new focus in Ridgefield on let's get our test scores better, and enrollment keeps falling down, I think you'd win so many more people over to the idea of, sure, close a school, save some of that money for the seniors, give it back to them, and then save some of the money for the programs. I think that's what everybody's just waiting for. But I don't think people are sitting there saying, for the most part, let's never close a school. I don't think that's a correct perception.
All right, hold that thought 1 second. Al has a follow-up?
I've been looking at some of the data, and it seems to me, well, why is there such a focus on closing these schools when you have problems in terms of test scoring in Ridgefield? Shouldn't more emphasis be placed on, hey, how can we get these test scores up so we can make sure that these kids are getting a quality, good education as opposed to saving a couple of bucks?
Well, no, let's be clear. I have not sat here and said, let's save a couple bucks. What I've said is, take the money you're spending on overhead and put it into programs. When you look at our test scores, and one of the arguments that is often brought forward is let's keep 6 buildings and reduce class sizes from 20 down to 15 or 21 or whatever, down to smaller sizes. When you look at the test scores, one of the things that struck me as I went to one of the restructuring meetings was one of the administrators said you can't use the argument that class size is hurting us because, in fact, the schools with the smallest class sizes were scoring poorer, less well, than the schools with the larger class sizes.
And why was that?
And
I don't think that.
when you look at the data and the folks who have done a lot of work on class size, one of the things, and
because I've always from the notion that larger class sizes means you got a teacher dealing with more kids, and that means you have to, especially in elementary schools, I mean, the more kids you have at the first and second, third grade level, that means more attention you have to deal with kids. The smaller the class size, I would assume the better the quality of education would be just because you have to deal with less kids.
Yeah, well, the studies are very interesting when you look at them, and I'm not putting my fingers on the one I wanted, but what they've said is if you can reduce class size, in the absolute, it's true, reducing class size could help you. But if you're reducing class size and your programs are no good, or not as good as they could be, you have small class sizes but poor programs.
But those are two separate issues, though.
They're not, they are separate, but they are combined with respect to budget. And your ability to fund programs, to fund things like literacy coordinators, math coordinators, science coordinators, when you look at an elementary school teacher, they're expected to be experts in multiple subjects, in teaching typical kids, kids with special needs. They face an immensely broad range of problems and issues that they need to master. And they need support and expertise in terms of curriculum and coordinators and people who can say, look, here are 2 different ways of teaching literacy or teaching math that they might not be aware of to ensure that the students do well. And when you look at the test results, and, you know, this is, I don't know if people can see this. When you look at test results in terms of CMT scores and elementary class size, you get that one yet?
Yeah.
What you see is the end result is more it's completely random. And in fact,
Now,
you can't get this one yet?
Where's the data from this?
This is the Connecticut State.
CMTs
Yeah,
stuff?
well, CMTs, it's the district profile data.
Okay. Because I do a lot of, I deal with a lot of education. And in fact, I want to be, I'm working to become a teacher, and a lot of stuff I deal in Danbury, especially now, it's going to be focused towards education. So I have somewhat knowledge in terms of that. And I just want to go back on the class size again, because if your program is the problem, if you put more kids in classes, you'll get into a situation where you might have special needs kids with a regular class. You have a teacher who has to deal with more students.
Yeah,
and I just think that's just going to hurt the quality of education one student can get, because the kid has to deal with, instead of like 10 kids or 15 kids, the teacher has to deal with 20 kids. And just logically speaking, if you have to deal with more kids, the less time you have to deal with a single kid in terms of teaching that student.
I understand your point, Al. And I think in an ideal world, you're doing both. In the real world, you have to look at trade-offs. But what this data shows, if you can come back into this, is you have average class sizes down here, and VP has some of our smallest class sizes, roughly 18, and their fourth grade CMTs, 85% achieved goal. Farmingville had almost 21 students on average. They did almost 5% better. All these dots are basically the schools from our DIRG, so Weston, New Canaan, Darien, Wilton, Westport, and it's a shotgun blast. The regression on this stuff is zero. The amazing thing was the slope is positive. Now there's virtually no correlation, but the slope said the bigger the classes were, the better they did on the tests. There's something else going on within these classes, within these elementary schools, than simply class size. And the question is, you need to get in there and look at the specific data, and where are they not doing things well, and can you bring extra resources to help them understand a literacy modality or math modality to help move these kids forward, as opposed to simply saying, look, we're only going to put 18 kids in your room, but you still don't understand, you haven't been trained, you're not an expert in math. And taking a little bit of money, and we did this in math, we upgraded the program, we put in a math specialist to train teachers and help teachers, we put in math paras to help them with the kids who needed special needs, and we're seeing improvement. Those costs have to come from somewhere, and fundamentally they come to a certain extent at the expense of changing class size down by a couple percentage points. And the answer might be you're better off giving the teachers a little bit more resource and having somewhat larger classes. I'm not talking about change the class size from 15 to 30.
Right.
I'm talking about, is it 20 or is it 21? And do they have the resources to execute the task and all the expertise they need to do?
Chris, we're going to go to break here. I want to give you the last word. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm looking at that graph, and that's interesting, but I think with respectfully, Keith, that it's oversimplified, that you're trying to make it this comparison between two variables, and we all know there are many more variables, that common sense, from Al's point of view, common sense says that class sizes do matter. And now your graph is there, and I haven't vetted those numbers, so I don't know what they are, but the graph is there, implying the opposite is true, and it just makes me see it and say, well, there are other things going on. There's the income of the family that's going on. There's the focus of the school. Maybe some of those school kids are focused too much on sports at the moment and not on their academics. So there are just too many variables for you to make that simple comparison there. I don't think that's a fair way to look at it.
No, I think we're saying the exact same thing, Chris, which is it's not a simple comparison. There's a lot of things going on which you need to understand. And the advocates for simply smaller class size are overlooking all these other variables that you just touched on. And my point is, rather than a simple solution or a simple expenditure of money, we need to focus on understanding all those details that you just touched upon. I'm sorry.
And then just to throw in one more sentence there, then that's exactly why we shouldn't close the school now. We have to take the time to vet out all those things. Not with a big, giant discussion group of 36 people in the room. That's silly. But 3 people should sit in the room and really work rigorously to try to figure this out.
So you're saying 3 really smart people instead of 36 people that put together a big presentation. Is that what you're saying?
When I had my company, if I walked into a conference room for a meeting and there were 36 people, I'd leave.
All right. Well, unfortunately,
anything done.
for better or worse, we're a democracy, and I was certainly looking forward to hearing from what they decided on the school configuration, and I came away from that meeting empty-handed.
Yeah.
And we seem to be kicking this down the road another year. And by the way, for whatever it's worth, because we just came out of an election cycle, the Board of Finance, I said repeatedly, has very little input on anything having to do with school configuration. And I learned that the Board of Ed voted and decided not to close the school this year. I learned about that by reading the paper. So for whatever it's worth, it's a little personal issue, but the Board of Finance did not have any input into the closing of a school one way or the other. What the Board of Finance does advocate for, though, is the efficient government, the efficient execution of a $77 million budget when it comes to the school. And if we have anywhere between 6 and 12 empty classrooms at Eastridge Middle School, that's just selling our students short, because it's putting resources into polishing the floor, doing custodial work, heating, cooling, and otherwise schoolrooms that are empty, and that doesn't make any sense to anyone. Wouldn't you agree? Chris?
Yeah, if that's directed at me, I think I agree.
I'm looking
with you on
for
that.
anyone to agree with me.
Middle school has overcrowding, so really those classrooms should be used, and the district should look into that.
All right. I got to take a break. Chris, if you can hold, we'd love to have you continue, seeing as how you're the founder of Ridgefield Live, a blog that single-handedly has been attributed to voting down a budget a couple of years ago. So I want to get your input on that. Any last words before we go to break?
No, let's go to break real quick.
Okay, we're going to go to the break, and we also have some interviews with people on the street. David, if we could have those queued up, we'd like to get that. We did some work on Election Day as well. So stay tuned to Ideas of Work and Beyond. We'll be right back with Keith Miller, the candidate in the runoff election on November 24th. Come out and vote. Go out and vote. People died for your right to vote. You should do it. We'll see you in a minute. Jay, what animated you to come out?
Is he still there, or is he muted?
Chris is still here.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
For the first time for office, and we wanted to support her in particular.
Well, what's her name? What was her policy?
Nina Mahajer, and she's a Democrat running for the Board of Education.
Excellent. Well, we actually just had a chance to interview Nina. She speaks 5 languages.
Yes, she does.
And she kind of made an appeal for a bipartisan approach to some of the town's issues.
Yes, that's correct.
All right, well, thanks a lot. Thank you very much, famous Ridgefield resident, John Metzger.
Great golfer.
An outstanding golfer. He's got an incredible golf game, soft hands, wonderful around the green. So, John, you went in, you voted, you got Girl Scout cookies. What brought you out to vote today?
Well, I think the issues in town are important to support, and I want to make sure we get the right people in our town government and the Board of Education and police commissioners and so forth, and it's important that people participate. I always try to lead from the front, so here I am.
Absolutely. Now, when you first moved to town, what were some of the things that you appreciated about Ridgefield that first brought you here?
Well, the reason my wife and I moved here in 1986, our kids were 5 and 8 at the time, and the school system was very important to us. Plus, we wanted to move to a nice, clean community, crime-free, and a place where we could raise our kids, and we did that successfully. And one of my sons is a lawyer, the other son is a news producer, so that plan worked out perfectly.
So you came out, you vote, and you got Girl Scout cookies to boot. How about that?
Right. It doesn't get better than that. Thanks.
Better than that.
Good luck in the election.
Great, thank you. All right, well, brand new Scotts Ridge Middle School, paid with our tax dollars here in Ridgefield. I have 3 delighted Ridgefield voters, and I just want to know what brought you out to vote today.
Well, we're concerned that our tax dollars be spent in an appropriate way, and we're very interested in finding people who will look after them well.
Sounds like she needs a good Board of Finance candidate. How about yourself?
I've been in town for 42 years. I've watched the school system grow up through all these years, and I still want to make sure that our school system and our funds are entrusted to the responsible people. No more of this spending crazily for these unimportant projects. Let's get the basics for education, and let's keep our hand on the controls of the finances in this town.
Sounds like fiscally conservative. You know, I saw in a recent study the 169 towns in Connecticut, and Ridgefield was #1 as far as the percentage of high school graduates that go on for a 4-year degree. So it sounds like education is going well. You just don't want it to cost a fortune.
Excellent education system now, and I think we've got to look at the cost. I mean, some people say, oh, you know, we're paying less than other towns. Well, you look at Bridgeport, how much do they pay per person? I think they're a couple $1,000s a person more than we are, and I don't think their education is any better.
No,
so
per pupil, I think we're spending somewhere in the neighborhood of $12,000, $13,000. In New York City, they're spending $25,000 per student in the public schools. I don't think you'd want to trade with them.
I don't think so.
And what brought you out, sir?
Basically the same reasons these other people are out. I want to make sure my tax dollar is getting the biggest bang for the buck. I love this school system. All my kids went through it. All of them went to college and got 4-year degrees, and I think we need to keep that up. However, there's a lot of projects in the school system that I kind of wonder about. You're only servicing 20 to 30 students out of this huge population. We got to watch where the buck is spent so we get the biggest bang for our dollar.
Well, thank you very much. 3 Ridgefield voters looking for the biggest bang for the buck out of their tax dollars. Thanks for coming. Old high school
Okay,
senior.
that was on Election Day, and a random sampling of voters, those that we could talk into appearing on camera. Let me go through a little bit, because your opponent in this race initially came out and said that she was dead set against any school closings, even if it went down to. And then what has happened since then?
Well, I mean, the comments in the press, and you can open that up and read it as well as I can, is that she concedes that if enrollment declines, then we shouldn't be wasting money on unneeded or empty space.
Right.
And my position is not that we close a school immediately. That's a mischaracterization. My point is we should immediately begin the detailed work to understand how you do it and the benefits of doing it.
Right.
And not simply kick that can down the road indefinitely into the future. Do the detailed work now.
These are some. These are comments that were made on Ridgefield Press Online, which, in lieu, Chris, of your Ridgefield Live, which I like too. That seems to be the next place people call in. But they said about this debate that didn't happen. Too bad. While Marty is a Republican, I'm a Republican. It is a public access TV program that could have allowed a large number of people, well, at least those who weren't watching Office, to hear from both candidates. I read in the paper or on one of these websites that Reed, talking about Mac Reed, was willing to moderate, and that's true. Mac Reed was going to be the moderator of this. I think that would have been fair. Marty openly endorsed Keith, and Mac Reed did Irene. So
Actually, I never got your endorsement.
No, I wrote a letter in here. I said,
you did?
Yeah, what did I say? It was really, I said you were a reasonable guy and hardworking and informed or something like that. You know, I don't know. Yeah, I got and other people have asked the following questions. He said, talking about your 6-page memo Mr. Miller sent to Board of Ed Deb Lowe. The document clearly and unambiguously states his intention to close the school. I saw the memo written to the Board of Ed, however, I have also seen his and Irene's position in the paper, and both say that it is an option. I will listen to him and see if he further clarifies his position. What I don't think is that it's an absolute. Keith closes the school and Irene doesn't. That's his comment
I wanted to
on
bring up
that.
the whole thing about the memo. Could you address that at all?
Yeah, the memo I gave the school board, one of the things that they were struggling with was the idea that they didn't have space to fit into 5 buildings. And as I said, back in 2002-03, we had almost 2,600 students in 5 buildings. Today we have 300 fewer students. So it begs the question of, could you not fit these students back into 5 buildings? There are about 8 classrooms that are used for various sundry uses or just not used at all. And one of the other things that I saw was we have a computer lab in every building.
Right.
And it dawned on me that rather than having computer labs that students use once a week or once a month, you could convert those into classrooms and thereby actually reduce class size or maintain it. And with the savings, give all the kids a computer in every room.
That's what you said.
And rather
earlier
than
on.
walking off to use a computer every once in a while, begin to find ways to embed the use of the technology in education today. The rollout of it, curriculum and all the rest may take time, but if you have the infrastructure, you have the tools, you have the base to do that work. And it struck me that rather than having 180 3 classrooms scattered in 6 buildings, have 103 classrooms in 5 buildings, with all the students having computers, is a better educational opportunity for Ridgefield. And that's what was described. Now, the other point that was in that memo was, I've done this with information that is sort of publicly available. It's not conclusive. You have to do the detailed work to see what is truly feasible. It was more an elucidation of an option that I believe deserves exploration, as opposed to a definitive, this can be done. And the conclusion of it is, go do the detailed work to see what is feasible here.
So again, let's just hit this one more time. You are not dead set on closing a school. I mean, your options are open. On
Yeah, no, the options are open, but to be...
Because there's a perception, again, that you're out there, that you are for closing the school.
Yeah, to be, I don't want to waffle on it.
Right.
I do believe sometime in the next year, 2 or 3, as the enrollment drops, we are wasting money on a building that could be put into education. So something should be done, okay? When is it possible? How do you implement it? How do you take advantage of those savings? Are critical questions that need to be developed and answered. But operating facilities below capacity is expensive and not helpful.
Chris, your thoughts?
It sounds like it's not just your message, though, Keith. It's the entire Republican effort there. You've got some other cohorts on that board, and I'm not sure they're saying it exactly the way you're saying it now. The message, I think, has gone out there to the public of, we want a school closed in this next school year. That's what the people are hearing. That's what I'm hearing.
Well, look, Chris...
not from you right now, but that has been the message very loudly for the last couple of months.
Yeah, Chris, I'm telling you, there's a lot of misinformation out there. There really is. Having just gone through an election, the thought that the Board of Finance was going to close the school, or that we wanted to close the school, or something along those lines, is just absolutely not true. And the most recent vote of the Board of Ed bears that out. I think there's... It's a very sensitive issue for those people whose schools they potentially feel may be closed, and it's a very impassioned thing. But I think a lot of people have been painted with a broad brush that isn't completely accurate in the midst of all this. I mean, I get it. People, wouldn't appear on this show because they said, it's some sort of partisan thing, and misspelling of last names are meant to, hurt people's feelings. I mean, it's gotten to be a little bit silly, frankly.
Well, I just wanted to, you touched on it a little bit. There was a message or posting that was in the forums also stating that, have you ever sponsored a true nonpartisan debate before? And is there a conflict of interest, seeing that both you individuals are on the Republican Town Committee? Right. And,
well, Mac was invited. And Mac had endorsed Irene, and Mac was going to come. And Irene decided that she did not want to participate. Now, conversely, the Democratic Town Committee put on a candidate forum with just Democrats, completely partisan. I went to it. I went to it to answer questions. You can go to a partisan event.
Yeah, but Keith,
go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Chris.
If I can chime in there, though, I mean, I think people generally know the picture here. The Republicans didn't choose to show up at the first series of debates. And you and I know that the excuse given was that there wasn't time for all 4 Republican candidates to show up for something, and yet there you all were at Casagmo one evening to talk to the senior citizens there. And so it sounds like that should be stated here also, that maybe the Republicans were avoiding the first debate.
Chris, that's a mischaracterization, and you really should just stop doing that. Because what happened
Wait a minute,
was...
you were there.
What happened... That statement... Let me finish. I was there. And what had happened was the PTA had set up an event for a night which they didn't contact us directly, they didn't talk to us, they didn't confirm, and we were all conflicted on that evening. Now, they didn't come back and say, could you do it the night you're going to Casagmo? They didn't do that. They just stopped. So to say that we were available some night, that they tried to schedule something, or to give that impression, is a misrepresentation. That didn't happen.
Wait a minute. You're part of the process. You could have come forward to say, hey, all these Republican candidates are available on the Casagmo night. What happened there?
In terms of what? In terms of saying we're available that night, the PTA can take over that event?
Yeah, and we could turn it into a debate.
Well, Irene showed up. I mean, Irene Burgess showed up, and we talked. So I'm not understanding the conflict here. It seems to be
the conflict
it seems
is you
to be
guys are
a
trying
created
to that Irene
problem.
wouldn't show up for the second debate, whereas the truth is also in there that in the first go-round of the election, all you guys were available on, as I understand, on 2 separate days, but you said you weren't.
No, that's not true. Okay, that's simply not true. And we don't need to debate that.
Chris, can you hold the line, and if you get cut off, call back?
Cool.
Okay, hold on one second. Caller, you're on the air. We lost him.
Well, please call back.
Yeah, please call back, Chris. Let me just say, as far as the previous election, the Veterans Park parents group invited us to come, and we all went, and it seemed to be rather partisan. The reason I say it's partisan is because they were handing out bags of information from the person that opposed us in the election, the same people that invited us to this event. So I don't know. I guess at some point the voters who are going to decide this election should have an opportunity to hear from the candidates, to ask questions, to be part of the discussion, and I think the more venues, the better. This was certainly an appropriate venue. We've had debates here before, and I think people would have enjoyed it. Not that they're not enjoying hearing from you, but I think there needs to be a counterweight to that as well.
All right, so real quick, let me bring up something that happened in Danbury, which was just nuts. And I think I had some people on a few months ago. We talked about administrators. We had 2 administrators here in Danbury who received a 9% pay increase in 1 year. And the teachers just went nuts, saying, you know, why do we have so many administrators here, and the teachers are getting the short end of the stick? How is the makeup of administrators in Ridgefield, and are the teachers getting all the resources they need?
Yeah, I think if you compare Ridgefield to many other school districts, the administrative staff is not heavy. Other people have assistant principals and other things. Could it be more efficient? Is a question that gets asked all the time. And you know, I guess in a really tough budget cycle, would you do things on the administrative side to try to save some money? Possibly. I think one of the best ways to do it is you don't have an extra elementary school principal, you don't have an extra elementary school administrative staff. There's things you can do there, but if you've got the building, somebody has to be in charge of it. So you have to have those things. Simply saying you're going to take out, it's very hard otherwise to do these things. You have to remove some of the structural costs. Now, having said that, there are needs, particularly in the elementary school, for subject matter experts to help teachers. It's been recognized for years. We got tremendous we got improvement on our math programs by having a math expert and some math paras added to it. And if you look at that, to a certain extent, it is administration, it is overhead. But there are benefits to some of this that we shy away from. They added a literacy consultant. They didn't hire it full-time. It's an area we know we need help in. Science is the same way. So there are some things that you might want to add, not simply, you know, take away as you work those equations.
Okay.
Caller, you on the air?
Oh, hi, Marty. Hi, Keith. My name is Jana Hogan. I attended the Tri-Board meeting last week, and Dr. Lynn Merrill asked a question of where does the money go when we cut the budget? And Di Masters made it very clear that it goes back to the taxpayers. And my question is, if we go and close a school and we save all the millions of dollars, it sounds like there's no guarantee that that money, those monies will actually go back to the school budget. They'll go back to the taxpayer. Am I correct in understanding that?
Well, can I?
Yeah, go right ahead. Yeah.
I think Di clearly stated her position. I think it was seconded by one other person, if I recall. But that's not, you know, everybody's thinking. The other side of it was, to a certain extent, it's a hypothetical question, a little bit in a vacuum. And when I looked at the elementary side, it looked like you could, in restructuring the elementary schools into 5 schools, you would create $1 million, $1.8 million worth of resources that you could use otherwise, with the elementary budgets being virtually flat. I think as you take that back to the taxpayers and you say, this is what we want to do, our expenses are flat, but we're not spending it on the building, we're spending it on programs and education, I think that's something that anybody should be able to strongly advocate for. Now, again, that's kind of a hypothetical, because maybe there's other stuff going on that's something, you know, doubled or tripled in cost that has to be covered. But I think the arguments can be made for, to the extent the school budget is not growing leaps and bounds, that taking money from one pocket and putting it to more effective uses stays within the schools.
Yeah, I mean, Jenna, just to answer your question, this Board of Ed budget is a $77 million budget, and they move money around within that budget a lot. If they have more teachers that opt for a less expensive health program than others, there's huge amounts of savings, and they can use that money in different areas within their budget. Last year, and I think we need to focus a little bit on some of the positive things that have happened in the last, say, 12 months or so. We've been in an unprecedented economic downturn, which everyone has experienced. The revenues to the town have gone down $1.2 million. But between the town side and the Board of Ed side, and kudos to Superintendent Lowe, they really found some economies of scale, and they were able to balance their budget within their own budget. Now, the school came in with a 1% increase last year. The town came in with a 1% decrease, real dollars year to year. If the school can come in with something anywhere near that and allow for savings within their own budget for school reconfiguration, for the new teachers contract that was brilliantly negotiated, I think, by John Palermo and some others on the Board of Ed that were involved with that. There are savings to be had within that $77 million budget that never really even come to the Board of Ed or need to be voted on, because they're finding economies within their budget that can be put back into the classroom and not into polishing floors and bricks and mortar. And I think that's what Keith is saying. At least that's my perspective on it. If the Board of Ed can find efficiencies within their budget and don't have to go back to the taxpayers for more and more increases, it's all to the good. I don't know if that answers your question, but I'm saying if the Board of Ed can find savings within their budget, I believe that they can spend those as long as their real budget isn't going up to a level that the taxpayers won't vote in favor of.
Yeah, but to add another thought to that, I mean, I saw Irene's comments where she said, look, she wants to do extended kindergarten, she wants smaller class sizes, she wants foreign language in the elementary schools, she wants to give up pay for play, a whole long list of things that would cost somewhere between 5 and 10% budget increase. And I got to tell you, from talking to a lot of voters, they're not going to take a 5 to 10% budget increase. They're hurting. They really don't want to spend more. So I think what the school board needs to do is to look inside, as Marty just said, find the efficiencies, move it from the least effective uses to more effective uses, and try to come in roughly around the same number. And I think that's something that would sell to the Board of Finance, the Board of Selectmen. That's what I heard Di saying. You guys, we cannot cut the town to spend more in your areas, what I heard her saying. It's what I heard Dave Ulmer saying. Any increase you want will be a direct pass on to the voters. Several selectmen and Board of Finance members said that's not going to fly. So you have to look inside to find the money to put into education, to invest in our children in the most efficient ways, and that's what I'm advocating for.
Did that kind of get to your question, Jenna?
Yeah, no, it definitely does. I'm a VP parent, so I paid very, very close attention to the issue on both sides, and obviously, Keith, when you put the proposal together, VP was the most viable case, so Raynor goes up.
As I said when I put that forward, look, there's an argument for maintaining a center of town school. The next smallest school is Farmingville. There's an argument for maintaining Farmingville, given the potential for, way down the road, maybe some Bennett's Pond development, and you got to look at some of the logistics of busing these kids. And there's an argument for Scotland, which is the third smallest, in terms of the campus setup, but there's also an argument against Scotland, which is you have with Barlow, you have another building in that location. So I don't think you can, without doing the detailed work, you can't sit there and say this building is the one that you should think of in terms of efficiency and all the rest. There's some strong arguments for maintaining VP.
Yeah, there really are some strong arguments, especially since it's in the center of town, and you don't want to have this big empty hulk in the center of town.
You don't want to bus kids from the south of town through the middle of the town, trying to get them up north of town. I mean, there's some arguments that just say that those routes won't work.
Yeah.
That's one quick.
Yes, please. Yeah, go right ahead.
It seems like in the same, we talk about closing a school, but also at the same time using those monies towards all-day kindergarten, and I cannot see how space-wise that's even a possibility.
Well, again, as I went through the work, part of it was linked to freeing up those computer labs, and I think you can, again, you have to look at the redistricting and how you do that. You can almost get there. A flip side is you leave half-day kindergarten and you shrink the class sizes. I mean, and you got to look at both options.
Jenna, thank you very much for calling in. We're coming up against the top of the hour, so we have to go. But I really appreciate it. And for you and everyone else, please do come out and vote. We will settle this thing. It'll be over.
Please.
One way or the other, up or down.
I
think, yeah, you don't have to paint the signs in your basement and get them out there. Al, any last words?
This is another example on why it's so important for people to get out to vote. I talked to Marty a little while ago about municipal elections, and I can't understand why people don't come out to vote in elections where you can have a direct impact on where your tax dollars go. But they come out to federal elections where you rarely see your congressman or senator. So come out and vote.
November 24th, next Tuesday. Thanks for joining us. Keith, thank you for coming in.
Thank you so much for having me.
Appreciate the time.
Thanks for your questions.
And we'll see you next week on Ideas at Work and Beyond, where we're going to have another exciting show. Who knows where we'll be.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.